Today's episode is brought to you by the Vegas Beer Guys and the Sounds in Cinema podcast.
Everything sequel contains explicit language. And why the fudge not, you melon farmer?
Night edition. My name is Michael Shantz of the How Dare You Awards, coming to you from Pacific Beach. Joining me, of course, Tom Stewart of Lonesome Whistle Productions. He's in Chula Vista. Hello, Tom.
What makes you think I want to hear you talk? We have so much to talk about. I wanted to get that up front that I don't know if we're going to get to Eric Roberts. But I just wanted to say
I got notes on Eric Roberts.
Casting Eric Roberts as a second-tier gangster is the perfect marriage of actor and character in cinema.
So great.
And, no offense to Tom Wilkinson, who...
I think he's great in Batman Begins, though. He
is. Eric Roberts is my favorite of the two mob bosses.
Okay.
Because he feels more authentic to me. Tom Wilkinson, I always get the sense it's an Englishman putting on an accent. I mean, maybe I'm a little more sensitive to that, being an Englishman who puts on an accent quite a lot in my professional life. But
he puts that accent on well, and he's so grounded in his malevolence. I love him in that movie.
Yeah, I think he's great. And Eric Roberts has the advantage of being like the B-list version of Falcone.
Yeah.
As he is the B-list version of everything in any part he plays.
You want to take a guess as to how many credits Eric Roberts has on IMDb?
It's got to be over 200.
Yes.
Am I close? It is over 200?
Oh, yeah.
Is it as high as 400?
Oh, yeah.
No. 6.
Right on the money.
600 credits?
611. Yes.
When does he eat breakfast?
I don't know. In 2021, I thought
This is the Eric Roberts podcast.
Yeah. For 2021, I thought he had 22 credits. But there were 22 credits, followed by at least a dozen credits that didn't have a year next to them, followed by 8 more credits for 2021. So this year is 3 months old.
So he's making movies temporally now?
Well, I guess it was stuff he's going to be doing, so there's that.
In the universe of
this guy's going to do 30 different projects this year. That's amazing. By the way,
more power to him.
Absolutely. I mean, and he has been nominated for an Oscar. That's the Eric Roberts catch-up part of our podcast today.
Well, yeah, and also just thinking about it, he has a famous acting sibling who prioritizes quality over quantity. So
sure.
This is clearly the niche in that family is to go quantity over quality, right?
Indeed. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's enough. We are talking about the 2008 film The Dark Knight, directed by Christopher Nolan. I think we all know Christopher Nolan. We got to know him through Memento and Insomnia, and then he moved on to The Prestige, and then we started getting into The Dark Knights, and then, Inception and Dunkirk, Interstellar, Tenet. It's quite a list. This movie had a budget, Tom, of $185 million, up from $150 million. Successive money jumps in these series. This movie had an opening weekend of $158.4 million. Made $500 million, or just over that, in the USA, $534.8, and $1 billion cumulatively worldwide.
Yeah, I remember it. I remember in the all of that
right?
Storm. Yeah, it's what I mean. I don't normally go. I know you're a like opening day guy, but I'm not normally. I normally hang back, but not for this.
Yeah. And like I said on our ranking episode, I went to see this movie in IMAX
Yeah, me too.
and was driving home, saw another movie theater, was like the movie was just spinning in my head, and I went and saw it again that day.
Well, I'm not gonna beat that, but I have to say I did probably go back within 2 days and see it again.
Yeah. So we would have declared this a great movie at the time, but we're both saying it's a good movie.
Good to very good,
Yeah. Right.
I would say. No, very good. I'm gonna
It
settle
is
on
very good. It is
good.
very good.
Yeah.
And I still have the sense of how very good it is when I watch it today. Even on
Mhm.
this last viewing.
Yeah.
But
I think,
most
you know,
of that hinges on Heath Ledger, right? This one striking,
I mean, you can't overstate it.
unbelievable, every second great performance.
I was going to bring this up in the minisode, but I'll bring it up now. I think watching this now, and like the last movie I watched involving the Joker, or last new movie I watched involving the Joker, was Joker.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I think Joaquin Phoenix has been overpraised for that performance. Certainly, I think that movie is overrated. You know, I may be in the minority there. But what I really appreciate here is the balance of the performance.
Mm-hmm.
I think Joaquin Phoenix it's a knowingly extreme performance, and I think, you know, you can either run with it or not. Here, the balance of slapstick and serious in the
Right.
performance, I think, is on the money.
Of
every
charming
single time.
and menacing. Like switching from one to the other in a span of 3 seconds.
Yeah, and you know, like, there's so much. It's really weird to sort of talk about this as like an underrated performance, but like from the beginning of the movie, I'm like, no one has given Heath Ledger the credit for his mask and mime work in the
Mhm.
opening scene of this movie.
I know.
I'm like, everyone talks about the pencil trick and the why so serious. I'm like, he does the first scene of this movie without his face, without words, and the character
Is shining
it's like
through.
it's like kabuki theater.
Yeah,
the
right.
character is just there
Absolutely.
from the outset, and I'm like, I can't think of many performances that can create a character so fully using so little of what the actor has.
Well, and it's interesting you say that because we're getting a lot more of that lately with superhero movies, right? So people who are covered up.
True. Yeah.
But to your point, I would argue, like you said, from the moment he's on screen, the fact that he's wearing a mask does not matter. You see the Joker shining through that mask.
Yeah. I mean, the opening scene of this movie, I was going to say cold open, but bear in mind the title of this movie does not appear till the end of the movie. So technically this entire movie is a cold open. The movie is actually the 6 minutes of credits.
There you go.
But the opening scene in this movie is as perfect an opening as I have ever seen.
Love it.
I mean, everything in the bank.
Yeah.
I'm always a little bit disappointed that they try and make it seem like the music runs into the next couple of scenes, which are not as good. Because that gives the sense that it's one scene. No, the bank is one scene, and everything within it is
Well, and I
perfect.
want to talk about the music just for a second, too, because, look, these 3 movies, Batman Begins, The Dark Knight, and The Dark Knight Rises, Christopher Nolan wanted each movie to have its own theme. The first theme was fear. This movie's theme is chaos. And the third movie's theme is pain. Chaos comes through even in the music. That whole front scene at the beginning of the bank when you're seeing the window and the window blows out and then you have the shot of he doesn't have his mask on yet while he's standing on the
Yeah.
street corner, and that kind of string music just quickly back and forth. It's
Mhm.
unsettling.
Yeah, very unsettling. Yeah.
And there's just so much great thought put into what you're going to see and hear throughout this movie that's, like you said, I think is not done well in the next movie, but to me it's done
And
much
in parts
better.
of this movie too, I would say.
Okay, so that was my next question for you, because where does it not work for you?
I start to get it. I mean, most of it's in the second half of the movie. I start to get a flavor of it in the scene in the parking garage with the copycat Batmans. It's the first whiff I'm getting that not every scene in this movie is going to be essential.
Right.
I'm like, if we're front loading the movie with this is how we're re-meeting Batman, I'm not sure this movie really has its finger on the pulse of what's relevant and what's not. And I mean, there's aside from the fact that I don't like seeing dogs, especially Rottweilers, which I own, hurt.
Yeah.
I mean, the most confusing cameo in all of cinema, where Scarecrow, Cillian Murphy's Scarecrow, comes back, but Batman doesn't recognize him. I don't even want to go down that rabbit hole. I don't know. I don't know if it's the same guy. I don't know if he's an imposter. I don't know why he looks the same and is played the same. I don't know. I like seeing Cillian Murphy. I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
But this, we've gone. I mean, it's about the drop off from this heist. It's not. I wouldn't even call it a heist scene. It's a heist movie in miniature.
Yes.
It's the whole of Reservoir Dogs and the major set piece from Heat.
Yeah.
That's the beginning of your movie. And so when we get into the parking garage, I'm like, okay. And overall, I would say, and I guess this is where detail hurts the movie a little bit. I can instantly say that there's one or two subplots that I would get rid of immediately.
They are
several set pieces I would get rid of immediately. I would untangle the convoluted plotting in several parts of this movie. I'd also not want to make it a movie that's arguing for benevolent dictatorship, but there's not much you can do about that, really, because then you wouldn't have a movie,
right.
Well, everything involving Reese can go. He's like a human deleted scene. Get rid of everything. Your movie would be none the worse. I would get rid of everything involving Lao and Hong Kong. I mean, if it's not
I was
clear
going to
enough,
ask you about that set piece.
if it's not clear enough that he's tangential to the movie, they have him appear in a kind of proto Zoom call at the gangsters meeting. I'm like, okay, if you need to do this, your character is not essential to the movie. You can get rid of him.
Yeah, but
I mean, it sets up Heath Ledger for the great line where
so
he
that's
said,
the thing. That's
the
the thing
television sets.
Yeah, and there's a lot of that in this movie where something like that sets up something else that's great. Because Heath Ledger,
but I don't think it.
at police headquarters, that's all great, and he's there to get Lau.
Yeah, but this is the weird thing. It's like when I was watching it this time, I was thinking, okay, 2008, The Wire has been on television,
Yeah,
and you can see the influence that's had, because we need to see like at least 4 levels of policing at any given time.
Right.
So it's like the mayor, the DA, major crimes unit, the plainclothes detectives.
Sure.
It's like I can definitely see the influence of that, but in this context, I think it hurts the movie. I like the way that cops and people who work in policing are represented in this movie, but I just don't need the level of detail about them. I mean, as soon as I see Ron Dean throwing a scrunched up piece of paper at a newspaper clipping of Batman, I'm like, that's all I need.
right.
I get it. I don't want to take us down a rabbit hole here, but
Yes, you
Ron
do.
Dean. Yes, I do. Ron Dean, the actor who
Oh, I
plays
know
a detective.
Chicago
Some
guy.
people might not. Some people might not.
All right.
But you should.
But any
Because this
movie
man-
involving Chicago, you're going to see that guy.
This man, to that point, this man has played a cop in The
Fugitive, right?
Above the Law,
Right.
NYPD Blue, and Frasier.
Amazing.
This is the 90s cop EGOT,
Right.
and Ron Dean has won.
That's fantastic.
Anyway, he also has one of my favorite scenes in this. To bring it back to this movie, he has one of my favorite scenes in this movie, which is when the shit's going down. He's drinking at a bar. And the bartender looks up at the TV, sees there's like a car chase going on. He turns to him and says, "Shouldn't you be out there doing something?" And he says, "It's my day off."
my
and
day
takes
off.
a drink. I'm like, oh, this is great. This is great shit.
That's awesome.
Ron Dean every time.
All right. Well, before we go to a break, can I ask you about the difference you see? Because Batman Begins, there's a more stylized Gotham City. So it looks like it's more of a comic book universe. In this one,
Yeah.
Chicago is Gotham City, and we are full natural.
Yeah.
Like the natural world. What do you
Right.
like more, the hybrid or Chicago or Gotham as it is in The Dark Knight?
Ooh. It's a good question. You'd think I'd prefer the hybrid, but
Mhm.
I think the pantomime in this movie comes with the Joker and everything he's involved with. Like he's the panache and the style. He's the stylized element of this movie.
Mhm.
And so it's good that he has like a realist backdrop around him.
Yeah,
I think.
yeah.
I mean, and again, looking back at the other Batman movies we've done, that hybrid has been a problem. We talked about how in Batman Forever, at night it's like fucking Disneyland.
Right.
During the day, it looks like a normal city.
Yeah.
So at least it's consistent,
Right.
and it's a consistency that works with the movie and doesn't.
I think I
Harm it.
think what it is more than anything too is this movie represents Nolan's vision at its best.
Yeah.
And so I
He's a
really
fascist,
like
correct.
the use of the city in this movie. Not to say that I don't like the hybrid in Batman Begins, because I think that's actually done well as a hybrid, better
Yeah.
than any other Batman movie, maybe.
Ooh, okay. Well, I'll pull back from that, but okay.
Well-
That's a conversation for everything sequel rebooted, maybe.
Well, are you thinking of Tim Burton's?
Yeah.
Because that to me is just more. That's just a full vision. That's a stylized
Okay.
city.
Yeah.
Whereas in Batman Begins, you still have Chicago, but you have a Burton-esque style mixed with it. That's the only reason I'm saying that.
Okay.
So to your point, what I'm thinking more specifically about Schumacher in Batman Forever.
Yeah.
The craziness compared to the regular city during the day.
And it really, to me, this
Like,
shift
I'll take
to a-
Tim Burton's vision
Yeah.
over
Right.
Batman
I get
Begins
you.
any day of the
I
week.
hear what you're saying.
Right, but
I think the shift to a recognizable Chicago cityscape is part of a bigger project to sort of change the genre a little bit from a superhero movie to a full-on urban crime movie.
yeah.
And the opening scene, in addition to all the other wonderful things that it does, plants us firmly in that world. It's a heist. We're in a
Right.
heist movie. I mean, the opening scene of this movie is so much like Michael Mann's Heat.
Yes.
It even has a cast member from the movie Heat in it. The guy who plays Van Zandt in Heat.
yeah.
And he's not making the same mistakes he did last time. He gets right out there with the shotgun. It's like, I'm not
with
letting
the
bank
sawed-off,
robbers
yeah.
fuck me around. So I think that generic tonal shift is already there, and to me, it makes it's like the color that the Joker brings to this movie.
Break, and then we'll come back and we'll dive deeper into The Dark Knight right after this.
I like to think I know something about beer, but nowadays even I get overwhelmed when confronted by the exhaustive selection of craft beers they have at bars, breweries, and even grocery stores. Back in the day you had one, maybe two craft beers to choose from, and if you were confused, you ordered a Guinness. But in beerstinations like San Diego, the craft beer options lately are in double, sometimes even triple digits. So what's a beer drinker to do? You need what I need, the Vegas Beer Guys. Your beer of choice should be a perfect blend of malt and hops. And so a live show about beer needs that same balance. And the Vegas Beer Guys matches beer expert Dan Aker with self-proclaimed beer novice Stephen J. Weiss. The results are eminently drinkable. They're on Facebook, they're on Instagram. They'll try new beers, they'll tell you about beers. Think of them as your beer Sherpas guiding you up a foamy-headed mountain to reach the peak of your pint. God, I need a beer.
And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. Tom and I are here discussing the 2008 film by Christopher Nolan, The Dark Knight. All right, Tom. We both think that we thought this movie was great when we first saw it. We still think it's a very good movie.
Yeah.
I got posed this question from somebody just the other day.
In your Dark Knight support group.
Yeah, exactly. Does this movie stay a good movie if Heath Ledger isn't in it?
I mean, that is the question,
right?
And the best reviews I've seen of this movie, all of them, to a piece, mention it's hard to imagine what problems you would notice if Heath Ledger weren't there to distract you from those problems.
Right.
And he's right in the middle of those problems.
Yeah.
Like he's not comic, well, he is comic relief, but he's also, the crux of the movie in so many ways.
Well, and I find that interesting too, because he manages to do that without us finding out anything about his origin story.
Well, that is what I think is if this movie has a genius, and I'm not sure that it does, this is the genius
I
of
agree.
the movie.
Yes.
Batman Begins was an origin story.
Right.
And The Dark Knight, in classic sequel inversion style, laughs in the face of the idea of an origin story.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the device of having the Joker have multiple origin stories, none of which you can trust.
Right.
And for him to represent nihilism. And, at a time when basically every big franchise is rebooting and telling the origin stories of its
characters,
its characters, whether it's James Bond or the X-Men movies or whatever. That's what's happening in cinema. Whereas The Dark Knight, to its absolute credit, is saying, you know what's really fucking scary and interesting? When you don't know. Like, by the end of the movie, I was like...
And when you think you know, and then come to find out, he was just full of shit, just to be menacing.
You spend a good half hour of this movie thinking that story about his father cutting up his face is true.
Right.
Because there's nothing to suggest it's not. And it clearly has had someone slice up his face.
Yes.
But by the end of the movie, I'm realizing that, the appeal of I guess this is another generic shift as well. It's like urban crime movie, but also slasher horror.
Yeah, right.
Because
No,
he
totally.
becomes like a Michael Myers character. It's like we don't. I mean, until we find out that it's his sister. Let's just say Michael Myers from the first Halloween and the most recent Halloween.
All right.
When he has no motivation, and that's the level that we're. I mean, why no? I mean, we should all listen to Alfred. Everything Alfred says is true, and if
Yeah.
it's not true, it will eventually happen.
Yes.
Okay, everything he says. The tragedy of these movies is no one listens to Alfred soon enough. But Alfred says it like early in this movie. He's
Right.
like, "This reminds me of this guy in Burma."
Just
Um,
stealing
there was
jewels.
no reason. Yeah, there was no reason for this warlord. There was no reason for him to be doing what he was doing either. This is the same. It's like it's the same thing.
Yeah.
And so he tells us that don't believe a word this guy says. He is literally his only philosophy is no philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
His motivation is no motivation.
Right.
I mean, it's just beautiful, and
Because
what it,
he has the line, like, look what I've done to this city with a couple sticks of dynamite and a few bullets.
yeah,
And that's who he is.
yeah.
And
So-
all he wants.
But then but at the same time, like a lot of that is performance, and I'm sure it's all part of the same. It's all part of the same thing. It's just working together all very nicely. But you have to give the movie credit and the way that the movie's written and the way the movie's directed
Yeah.
for the fact that that's the use they make of him
Absolutely.
in the movie. And I'm not gonna sort of say that because like the Joker is involved in a very, very convoluted storyline that does not need to be as complicated as it is. But in terms of character, I guess you'd say, in terms of representation,
Mhm.
they are right on the money in how they execute that. And that's behind the scenes as well as in front of the
Yeah,
camera. It's not
right.
like he turned up on day one and Chris Nolan's like, I've got a great idea.
Yeah,
What if he has
right.
no origin story?
Yeah.
Um
It was all
it's-
it was baked into the cake. That was part of the plan for this movie.
Yes, I think so. So that impresses me. That's part of the reason why this is a very good movie. A big part of why it's a very good movie. But
So let's take the other,
yeah,
is there enough there in the transformation of Harvey Dent into Two-Face and whatever angst Batman is going through, kind of learning his limitations?
I characterize it. It's more in the next movie, but there's a lot of it here.
Uh-huh.
Batman doesn't want to be Batman.
Right, right.
He periodically opts out of being Batman. He's not very good at being Batman. Okay, so that's what we got going on here. Harvey Dent is a really interesting one because, again, I think and this is the same with Catwoman in the next movie. Nolan's idea of, and this fits in with Joker too, like there's no transformation of Harvey Dent into Two-Face. He's already Two-Face when the movie begins. That's my
Right.
theory. Like the face burning off, the half the face burning off is the trigger moment. It's a cosmetic.
There's something that doesn't click for me in that, though.
Right? Yeah. No, I'm not saying it as a wholly positive thing
Right.
because but the fact that he's already called Two-Face, that's
Mhm.
already his nickname.
Right.
He already decides life or death matters with a two-headed coin. When the scene where he pulls one of the Joker's men aside and starts interrogating him, it's
That's
like,
where
what-
that's
if he's
where they
a
lose me.
villain, there's no this scene will
Right.
play no differently. if
That's
he
where
was
they
already
lose
Two-Face.
me. The idea
Yeah.
that he's walking away from that scene and then he turns back around to go torture somebody.
Yeah.
There just wasn't enough Two-Face that I saw within him, even though you have the two-headed coin. Those tertiary is, him being called Harvey Two-Face down at the police station. That's, that doesn't make the man a bad, that doesn't turn him into a bad person. That wouldn't be enough. He's an idealist at the beginning, right? He wants in on this secret group. He wants to be with Gordon and Batman. He wants to take action with them.
Well, I think the way that Nolan and the is it Jonathan Nolan who also wrote this movie?
Yeah, I think so.
The brother?
Yeah.
And Goya, the way they see it is that there is no transformation, that Harvey Dent is Two-Face. They are literally two sides of the same coin.
Mm-hmm.
I think they less successfully, not that this is wholly successful, less successfully they do the same thing with Selena Kyle and Catwoman in the next movie. There's no transformative moment. I think it's just how he sees Batman villains.
Right.
And, the best example of that is Heath Ledger's Joker, where it's like, this is the guy. He might put makeup on, he might dye his hair and wear a suit, but this is the guy. Like, he doesn't fall into a vat of anything.
No, exactly, right.
So I get that, and it has varying degrees of success depending on the individual villain. I'll speak up for how Aaron Eckhart plays the role, because I really like that actor.
I do too.
I think he's definitely watched both Lee Jones and Dee Williams.
Yeah.
I see that because he's like playing it right between those two.
Mm-hmm.
There's
Right.
never too much of either of them. It's perfectly done. But I agree with you that the movie is not doing him much favors in terms of allowing him to have an arc and a development,
Right.
and a villain's transformation.
Yeah.
And when his face burns off, it's kind of cosmetic at that point,
Mm-hmm.
which may have been the point, but I don't know what's satisfying about that as a storyline.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think I agree with you there.
And we've talked in previous podcasts about how the Batman movies have always had a problem juggling its villains, and I actually think it's kind of seamless here. How
I agree with that too. I had spoken.
The torch passes from Joker to Two-Face
Right.
really well here.
And that is in the writing. That's there. Their scene together at the hospital is really great.
It is. It's really good.
I love that.
I loved. I mean, there are so many moments in this movie that remind me of when Heath Ledger reminds me of late Marlon Brando, and the movie really leans into that.
Mm-hmm.
So the scene where he dresses up as a nurse for
Right.
no reason. He could have been a male nurse.
Right.
Could have been a doctor.
Right.
Could have been anything. I mean, he dresses up as like a sexy nurse as well.
Yeah.
Is the additional part of it, with nurse's shoes, like the awkward clanking shoes. It reminds me of a scene in the Missouri Breaks where Marlon Brando appears in drag for literally no reason, and then in the interrogation
Right.
scene, they shoot him like Colonel Kurtz in Apocalypse Now.
Uh-huh.
There's a lot of weird intertextuality, and like 2 scenes directly lifted from Michael Mann's Heat. Filming Heath Ledger like he's Marlon Brando. It's very strange. And then the end of the movie is just the man who shot Liberty Valance. It's the same ending. And then,
that's
there's the
great.
whole Godfather Part 2 thing with the mob stuff.
Right.
So, but anyway, that's beside the point. Yeah, it's a good job that scene is in there, because even by that point, I'm like, there's too many set pieces in this movie.
Yeah.
And that's about halfway in the movie.
And so I do remember also having conscious thoughts the first time I saw the movie, because Joker escaping from prison,
Mm-hmm.
this is like maybe a little more than halfway through the movie, and it
Yeah.
feels like a culminating.
Yeah.
It feels like the climax, right? It feels
It's
like
a fake climax,
Right.
right? Yeah.
and
I
you
mean,
have so
in
many
the
big
storyline,
set
too.
pieces after it, where you have the hospital thing.
Mm-hmm.
Then he's like running a game of trying to get the guy killed on top of
Yeah.
that, followed by the whole the boat scene, the Batman
Yeah.
having to get the detonator from him,
Which
followed
is
by
too-
a final thing with Two-Face. There's a lot after that.
Yeah, and the other part of it is it's the same set piece.
Mm-hmm.
They all involve like a choice between two, a life or death choice,
Right.
or a choice between two equally difficult decisions. It's like by the end of the movie, I that really wears me down that Harvey Dent's, Two-Face shtick at this point is it gonna be your wife who dies or your son who dies? It's like we've done a variation of this at least 3 times.
Right.
Whether it's the people on the ferries or choosing between Rachel and Harvey.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that they're calling back deliberately and that it's revenge, so
Right.
you're repatterning and all that sort of stuff. But I just think, filmmakers and screenwriters should have better sense to repeat themselves so much within one movie.
Yeah, I'll agree. Yeah, I agree with you there.
I mean, the ferries is definitely one of my set pieces that could go.
Okay, I was gonna ask you.
You could also just talk about it. You don't need to see it.
Right.
When you think about it, you don't
Mhm.
ever need to see it.
But
You
I guess
certainly-
it's all part of this. That's all part of. I don't even know. Is it the B story or the C story for
Right.
Like, is Batman the B story or the C story for you?
Well, this has come up before, hasn't it? Like,
Yeah.
how is Batman as a supporting character in his own story? For some reason, you could definitely make that case here, but for some reason, it doesn't.
Because everything you're talking about, as far as like what happens on the barges and that, those choices that those characters make, are all part of Batman's underlining story of him trying to be a symbol for the people of Gotham to be better people and make the better choice, right?
Yeah.
So he doesn't want them in their hockey gear with guns trying to kill criminals, but he does want them to feel compelled to try to save one another as opposed to hurt one another. And
Mhm.
that's a storyline for him at play throughout the movie.
Right. Yeah. I mean it. It doesn't bother. I don't think that Batman is sidelined here as much as he has been in, say, Batman Returns, which again I didn't have a problem with because
Right.
what they do with him is great and what they do with the other characters is magnificent. The same is true here. It's again, I think it's just it sets it the first time that Batman retires.
Right.
It's you're on a slippery slope because from then on in the trilogy he does nothing but periodically retire,
Yes.
and then he passes that fever to Alfred, who then retires. It's like it's so that's that part of it, and I'm trying to think about this in context, and we have we have the Daniel Craig Bond movies, which are all about James Bond not wanting to be James
Right.
Bond and retiring at the end of every movie.
Yeah.
So this is obviously not something that's particular to this franchise. It's something that
Maybe in that time period.
in the process of rebooting stuff,
Yeah.
there's I don't know. My theory is that you don't want to overlap with the material that's already been made, so you want your work to be in and around that. So there's that theory that Matt Myra has on James Bonding, that in the Daniel Craig timeline, all of the Bond movies happen between Quantum of Solace and Skyfall,
Gotcha.
which is obviously ludicrous, but that's kind of what they're writing to, that idea of like, we're filling in the gaps. And it's less of a problem here, but certainly it certainly sets the tone for the next movie, for this
Yeah.
for
sure.
an anti-Batman.
Right. Right.
And it's a weird kind of storytelling that that bothers me a little bit. I'm just trying to think of, the ferry sequence. What you're saying is right, but does Batman even know that that's happening?
There's the moment at the end when the Joker thinks he has him caught. He's got the bar on his neck, and
Yeah.
he's saying, and here we go. But it doesn't happen the way he thought, and Batman just has this faith in the people of Gotham to have done the right thing.
But I think that's a lie. The movie keeps telling us that on the surface.
Mm.
But I think the problem with this movie and the next movie is that this movie's sense of how society should work is that one person who is a good person, who is morally responsible, should be responsible for the entirety
Right.
of society, and that democracy is valueless. I really do think. Obviously the surveillance part of the movie, many people have commented on that as it's sort of like saying,
Sure.
Surveillance state is good. Obviously within the storyline in the movie, Lucius Fox does say this is immoral.
Yeah, right.
But the movie then says, but in your hands it would be fine. It's like, oh, so you're not arguing for dictatorship, you're arguing for benevolent dictatorship.
Right.
But nowhere in that does democracy get a play. Every time we see democracy in action in this and the next movie, or any kind of egalitarianism,
it's morally
it's a bad
reprehensible,
thing.
but I only need to do it for like a half hour.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It makes me think of that Homer Simpson quote. I'll said it before and I'll say it again. Democracy doesn't work. And I think that's what this movie. So while the movie keeps telling us that, through various dialogues and storylines, the people should be allowed to choose for themselves, the will of the people should govern. In this and the next movie, the politics of the movie are a little more sinister.
Yeah.
And saying, actually, these people are all helpless children, and we need one person to speak for them at all times.
Yeah. The protector.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's take another break, and then we'll come back, and I want to talk about some set pieces. How about that?
Oh, that could go on for a while.
Well, curb
This
yourself,
movie
sir.
has more than some set pieces.
All right. We'll be right back after this. If you like podcasts like I do, boy, do I have a treat for you. You need to
Stay on target.
and check out the Sounds and Cinema podcast. Listen as your host, sound designer and music creator Tony Parham, and co-host, musical performer and sound lover Derek Hansen, D-Rock if you're nasty, and I am, discuss all things sound related to film, television, stage, and theatrical productions. They discuss environmental sounds, bioacoustics, dialogue, the nature of communication through sound, but as an added bonus, they drink beer and try to
Stay on target.
find them wherever you get your podcasts and listen to the pure mania of a man who can charitably be described as Doug, the dog from Up, and another man with a soothing and sultry voice trying to get that man to
Stay on target.
That's the Sounds and Cinema podcast. Tune in and listen to the sounds they are creating just for you. And we are back yet again, ladies and gentlemen. Tom and I are here finishing up the 2008 film The Dark Knight, directed by Christopher Nolan. All right, Tom, I said we'd talk about set pieces.
Mm-hmm.
We've already talked about how much we both love that bank heist scene at the beginning,
Flawless.
which is a set piece.
Yeah. To end
And
all
I-
set pieces.
It's the one that's the one that makes you lean in this movie.
Yeah.
But I do not mind telling you, Batman cruising around in the Batmobile and then getting on the Bat Pod after it's destroyed, and the Joker chasing down Harvey Dent. That whole set piece to me is fucking amazing. And every time that truck flips over, the semi flips over,
Yeah.
I am re-astounded by the quality of filmmaking in that moment.
Yeah.
It's fucking great.
It's the centerpiece of the movie.
Yeah.
I wish that the plotting around it was a little bit clearer.
I mean, I don't get lost, but
No, it just. I wish
But
this
I-
was.
I
I,
think
wish
I
this
know
was
what you
being
mean.
done for a more high stakes reason, because it
Right.
feels like, as you alluded to, it feels like the climax of the movie, but it's actually the midpoint,
yeah, exactly.
and all based on a lie, it's all a
Right.
ruse. But the action itself, yeah, is unassailable. Tell you one thing, I think this scene also. And I don't think it detracts from it in any way. Well, it does, but not enough for me to go, this isn't cool and brilliant and the best action in the movie. The worst part of all the movies in this trilogy are the cutaways to people driving and their lame, redundant quips, which are all some kind of variation on, I gotta get me one of those, or
Right.
that's gotta hurt, but said less interestingly.
Yes.
And I don't know why this still happens in movies.
You're in
Why
for
can't we have decent cutaway dialogue? Like, these people are in the movie for 10 seconds. Give them something funny or interesting to say. Not just the same recycled,
nonsense?
platitudes. I mean, it's like, Right. It gets what the ops room in the next movie is the worst. Like, it's
Yes.
just it is like just an echo of what we've just seen.
Right.
But I don't know. It just makes every time I find in Batman Begins and this movie, I remember at the time thinking they really couldn't write better dialogue to be slotted into the cutaways in these action scenes. Anyway,
Man, you got
but that
problems.
doesn't detract from anything, and this is the only movie in the trilogy that doesn't end with Gary Oldman bumbling around with technology like Anakin or Jar Jar Binks in the Phantom Menace to save the day. So I'm happy about that.
All right.
Everything
fine.
is that nothing happens by accident. It's all very intentional.
Yes. Right. Well, let's talk about. We have a replacement actor, and we've talked a little
Maggie
bit
Gyllenhaal, yeah.
about. We've talked about Heath Ledger. We gave a little talk about Aaron Eckhart. And so, how did you like the replacing of Rachel Dawes?
It needed to happen if that character was to continue. It's definitely. I mean, you would be out of your mind if you say that's not a recast up. From Katie Holmes.
Mm-hmm.
Does she do anything more interesting than Katie Holmes? I don't think so.
So why is it a cast up then?
Because the little she has to do is done much better.
Okay.
Like just that one scene that was like a walk and talk of her leaving the courtroom with Harvey Dent.
Right.
And just their repartee, I'm like, oh, we're in a different league here. Like, even this kind of like stilted placeholder dialogue feels better in her hands. This is not about any one particular actress, but there's something so weirdly backwards about the Rachel character. Like, she feels like she comes from a Victorian literary melodrama or something. It's like it's all about letters that are lost and stolen, and it's just weird. It's the thing that the character in both movies that doesn't work. But given that it doesn't work, I'd rather see Maggie Gyllenhaal attempt it than Katie Holmes.
So I think it's interesting, actually, that you say that, because I never hated Katie Holmes in the first movie.
That is interesting.
But
bad,
upon
Mike.
watching the movies back to back, I found myself thinking I would have liked to have seen more interesting choices made in her scenes between she and Bruce in that first movie.
Yeah, that's true.
And I'm getting that from Maggie Gyllenhaal, and she's just great in this movie.
Yeah. She is. Yeah. I mean, on her end, she's really strong. It's a dead end for that character. Literally.
Well, that's
But
what
also,
that was the next
did
thing
she
I
do
was going to
before
say.
that?
I think that's kind of a big swing for this movie, to kill off that character.
Well, here's a what if scenario. what if the person who dies in the middle of the movie is Jim Gordon after all, instead of the fake out? And believe me, I do not want less Gary Oldman in either this or the next movie.
Right.
This is my favorite of his performances in any movie.
I agree.
Because I do not see this level of subtlety from him in most of his portfolio.
Exactly. I love him in these movies.
I know I know you are capable. It's like knowing he is capable of this in addition to, his more pantomime stuff, shall we say, makes me very happy. But again, it's an issue of like, what do we do? What do we do with him? And watching it this time round, I kind of, I alternative dimensioned it and thought, like, we know one of the things we know about Gordon is that he becomes Commissioner Gordon. What if he dies before he gets to become Commissioner Gordon?
Right.
Rather than killing off a character who, to many people's mind, never really worked and was certainly hated when it was played by another actor, and you feel like they just want to give them just enough screen time before they can kill them off, so it doesn't look like we just want to kill off this character. Like, I think that would have been a stronger choice, and I just remember thinking it seemed like a big waste of everyone's time, including Maggie Gyllenhaal's. Whereas I thought if they'd have done more with Gordon going forth in the end of this movie and then the next movie, maybe I would have felt differently. But I don't think they give Gary Oldman enough interesting, different stuff to do from now on, where it wouldn't matter if they killed him when they killed him. It'd be a big loss to.
Certainly not in the third movie. Yeah.
No. I mean, you wouldn't get to see him in his pajamas, a la Pat Hingle, but
exactly.
But I thought that, yeah. So it was like they want to kill someone off, but they went with an easy mark, low-hanging fruit, maybe.
Maybe.
Because you kill off Jim Gordon, then everything's off the cards. Because one of the things that was universally loved about Batman Begins was his performance.
Yeah.
No one had ever seen this level of restraint from him before.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember a critic saying at the time when Batman Begins came out, it's like, he represents Gotham City more than any other character in this thing. It's like this guy who's like wants to do the right thing but is too weak and is surrounded by corruption. It's like he is the center, and I agree.
Yeah.
And I like the fact that in this movie he gets the chance to say, I saved Batman, especially to his kid.
Right.
And that's a lovely, lovely moment.
This time I actually saved him.
And then the movie makes it clear that, yeah, this guy is the only true hero in this. Like the only honest, the only uncomplicated hero in this is Jim Gordon, I think.
Yeah.
But I'd rather have not gone with that fake out death to get to that point.
All right. That's fair.
I don't think he's used as well as other characters in this movie. But I'm so glad he's there.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Well, what do you have left in your notes? What do you want to talk about?
I'm trying to think of what big things
stand out to you.
We haven't talked about. Well, let's talk about Michael Caine and Morgan Freeman.
Okay.
So I think they warrant a discussion.
Now you have problems with the Michael Caine version.
No,
of
I realize
not him specifically, but like their relationship, right?
No, I have what I've said before, and I realize that it sounds like I'm picking on Michael Caine, who's one of my favorite all-time actors. In fact, right. As you can tell from the nasal quality of my voice and my uncontextually loud dialogue. I think. Are you frozen?
Nope.
Okay, good.
Oh, you were frozen there for a second. Sorry.
Oh, no, let's carry on. So much we can use so much of this. So I realize that like the excessive sentimentality all comes in Dark Knight Rises. I kind of
Yes.
conflated the two in my mind.
That was my question. That's what I thought
Yeah,
maybe
it's
happened.
none of it's here.
Okay.
And it was, to me, it was all about contextualizing why they make Alfred and Bruce so disconnected in Batman v Superman.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the only way I could rationalize it in my head was it's like they thought it was getting a bit too
If
much.
this one was dripping with melodrama.
They thought it was a bit too much when Michael Caine is literally crying his way through an entire movie.
Right.
So it's like, I can see the rationale. Obviously, you take it too far in the other direction, then you lose the whole point of Alfred. So I'd still rather have teary-eyed Michael Caine. But in this movie, I mean, he's... you know, I've made the note several times. It's like, why aren't people listening to Alfred? He's a psychic, and he only speaks in truths.
Right.
But I love so much about I mean, you know, he was another revelation, and no one thought he was right for this character in Batman Begins.
Uh-huh.
And then when they saw him in the movie, they're like, of course, he's perfect.
Of
Perfect
course he's
casting.
great. Yeah.
But
It's
in this
Michael
one,
fucking Caine.
in this one, he really consolidates that. He has so many wonderful moments. I love to think that the very nice man he talks about, who flies Bruce
Right.
Wayne to Hong Kong, is his character from Jaws: The Revenge.
Yeah.
And nothing in the film, we never see this guy.
Right.
We only know his job and that he's a very nice man. So, I'm still willing to believe that is
That
his
it
character
is.
from Jaws: The Revenge.
Oh, that's great. I love that. Now, do you even know if Morgan Freeman is Lucius? Is that part of the comic book world? I don't even know.
Lucius
I don't
Fox
really care.
is, yeah. And
Okay.
from the little I've seen of the comic book world, and listeners, please correct me, iconographically, he's the so. I mean, I don't know. If you only have the movies to go on, Lucius Fox is a cross between Q and Uncle
Yeah.
Remus.
Yeah. Right.
Now, maybe this is like this in the comic books too, but it's a strange mix. But
Works though.
it works really well,
He's
and
fucking
you know,
great. Come on.
I whenever you know you get the scenes which are just, you know, Bond at Q Branch basically, but done as Batman and Lucius Fox,
Yeah.
and that's not me forcing that. That is clearly what's, and we know how much Nolan loves the Bond movies. He
Of
talks
course.
about them all the time. That's my preferred interjection of the Bond universe into Batman.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Beyond, you know, I'd rather that than the Moonraker style cold open of the next movie. And actually, I think maybe, you know, I noted several times I was like, you know, I'm all for putting Bond where it shouldn't be, but
Of course you are. Let's not. Come on.
But you know, some of my biggest problems with the Lao Hong Kong storyline is that you feel like Nolan wants to have international espionage as part of his story, and it just doesn't.
I
belong
literally think
there.
that's all it was. They just wanted to see Batman outside of Gotham. That Batman could go somewhere else.
And it really harms the story because it's so Gotham City is so central to this movie more than any other.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm, you know, he's my preferred Bond vehicle. And it's, you know, it's a shame. I like the fact that, you know, he calls Batman out on his fascist tendencies, but it's a shame that, you know, their solution is, well, if you just put a good guy in charge, dictatorships are okay. It shouldn't really fall on more.
I'll help you this one time.
Yeah, you shouldn't really fall on the character's shoulders. It shouldn't fall on Morgan Freeman's shoulders, you know, especially when you're one of the few men of color in the movie. It shouldn't be, you know, and the
Right,
only
and that's one of my lingering problems with this movie is it just, you know, this. This movie is just as we are leaving the George W. Bush era. And so much
important.
of what he did is at play in this movie, and for the greater good is what the movie's presenting.
Yeah, it's a classic right wing argument that, you know, mass surveillance is okay because it catches people committing crimes, so it's permissible.
Right.
And that's what that, you know, the Facebook HQ wall is all about. You know,
Mhm.
the sonar wall.
Yeah, right.
And it's disingenuous the way it's questioned in the movie because they come out on its side in the end.
Yeah, right.
They say, well, as long as the person, as long as it's a good dictator, you can have a dictatorship. And the next movie confirms that, I think.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, you know, they could have used the next movie to walk some of that back, but they actually doubled down
And
on
they
it.
double down instead.
It's I also, I mean, you know, Lucius Fox, you know, has this moral dilemma thrust on him, but he is generally, you know, he is one of the few kind of uncomplicatedly heroic characters in the movie.
Yeah.
But the other people of color in the movie don't fare as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I love the actor who plays the commissioner. I've seen him he's British. I've seen him in all kinds of
he's
things.
great.
He's in a lot of sitcoms. He's a very funny man. I'm really uncomfortable with this idea of like him pulling the whiskey out from under the desk. It's like, here's how I handle problems, and you know, like it's like saying he dies because he's a drunk and that's his Achilles heel.
I don't go to that level. I don't say just because he's got whiskey in a drawer he's a drunk.
But he's, well, speaking from experience. But beyond that, the fact that, you know, a Latina character is the traitor,
Right, is the traitor, and
instead of Ron Dean, who, and they're kind of playing a game there where it's like, well, you don't expect it to be her because, you know, in the same way you don't expect disabled people to be bad people. You know, that's they're
to
playing
have a
with all
bomb
those
on their
kinds-
wheelchair
They-
in Congress.
apart from Zack Snyder.
Yeah.
But you're playing that game, but in the end, it's the people of color who end up on the losing end of that both times.
Yeah.
I don't know if I even know from the storytelling, from what's on screen, was Ron Dean involved? Was he working for the Joker?
I think he was.
That's not clear, though, is it?
It's not completely clear, but I think he took.
But he wasn't one of the names.
I thought he took one of. I thought he. Who took Rachel? Was it the other officer?
They were both in the car. Oh, who took Rachel?
Yeah.
Ugh. See, why is the movie?
It was the
asking us
woman,
to-
right?
I don't know. Why is the movie asking us to keep track of this at such a level?
True. But I thought Dean took Two-Face. I thought he took Harvey.
Okay. I noticed this time around that he was getting into a little car with those cops.
But I also noticed, because doesn't Two-Face shoot him, right? He flips his coin or twirls it on the bar.
It's off screen. I don't know whether they envisioned
I thought you hear a gunshot.
and then he becomes Mr. Freeze.
But later
Like he
you
falls into
see Dean as Commissioner Gordon is destroying the bat signal. He's standing right behind him.
Well, I guess they did. I guess he didn't then.
I don't know. I think it might just be a continuity error.
I think what happened was he shot him, he fell into a bucket of ice, and he was supposed to be Mr. Freeze. Oh, I know what I wanted to talk about. One of the biggest there's a huge star in this movie in a small role. Anthony Michael Hall
Oh, yeah?
as the newscaster, and there were rumors at the time that they were setting him up to be the Riddler. Especially
wow.
given that he's
I
the
didn't know that.
victim of the Joker at one point in the movie, and that this was supposed to be the incident that psychologically turned him into Riddler.
Interesting.
And I would have loved that, but I do wonder if casting such a known actor was a deliberate ploy to make it a red herring, so you didn't see where the next villain was coming from. Otherwise, I don't know why. I know his star's fallen somewhat, but I don't know why it's Anthony Michael Hall doing such a, or is that just I mean
because
that's a thankless role.
it's a thankless role, but it's a good sized part in a huge movie. There's no. If I was him,
He was
I'd
in
say
the Breakfast Club,
Yeah, but that's
and finally,
2 decades before this movie.
he's the star of Halloween Kills. He said, not too confidently, that's the title of the next one.
Well, we got to wait for that one, Tom. All right. Anything else for The Dark Knight, sir?
Yeah. Did you notice what the acronym for the Major Crimes Unit is that is said in this movie?
MCU?
MCU, of all
Yeah.
things. That really stood out to me this time.
Did it?
Yeah, because I don't know. We'd have to look up when they start using the term MCU in popular parlance, but I imagine we're starting to, the seeds of that are starting, right? In Marvel starting to build its cinematic universe. I just thought it was a very for a
But
DC.
you just thought. Do you think it was purposeful?
I don't know. It felt, given what happens next with it being, 2 rival cinematic universes based on superheroes, it certainly got me thinking.
Got the juices flowing.
Got the juice. Got the juices flowing. I mean, and just to sort of, and we can offset this to the next episode because, the first scene of the next movie is the last scene of this one. But we injure Batman at the end of this movie, and
Right.
I just thought like watching back after having seen the Dark Knight Rises, it's like they really wrote themselves into a story hole here by having Batman not able to be Batman because everyone thinks he's a villain.
Yeah.
Not that he's not, but everyone
Not wrong about that.
not wrong
by the
about
way.
that. But they think he's the guy who tried to murder Dent's
Right.
Gordon's kids and wife. And it's like, yeah, that burdens the next movie with having to get out of that story hole.
Yeah, I agree with you completely on that. I think that movie feels the weight of it.
All to have that kind of Liberty Valance, print the legend, not the truth. That's not the line, but something
akin.
something
I get it.
akin to that, which is fine. It's a nice button, but it seems a long way to go. It's a good cliffhanger, but it's a
Yeah.
But this is the other thing. Like, and we're going to talk about this when we get into the next episode. But I deeply misunderstood the storyline of The Dark Knight Rises when I saw it, to the point where and partly the end of this movie is to blame because not enough is made of that broken leg.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's the biggest thing for the first half of the next movie.
Of the movie, right?
And I was like, I remember when I watched Dark Knight Rises for the first time, I was like, I don't remember him breaking his leg. It's like, and I would have thought it would heal after 8 years.
8 years.
So that was fed around.
Yeah,
going,
limping.
Oh, my leg is gonna take at least 8 years to heal.
All right, well, we'll talk about that when we get. First, find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Write us an email to everythingsequel@gmail.com. For Tom Stewart of Lonesome Whistle Productions, I am Michael. Oh my gosh. Perfect.